Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ballroom and welcome to the UK Creative Festival. Thank you so much for taking the time to come. This session, as you know, is about creativity in the metaverse, and the evolution of Web 3.0 in the metaverse is going to dramatically change the foundations of creativity and the future creativity, what it looks like, who's involved in it, and how we deliver it. We've got a fantastic panel here to discuss exactly that today. Rhys Hancock, Ian Tate, and Nick Dehadri, and I'm going to hand over to Ian, and he'll introduce the panel.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I think one of the hardest things when we're sort of debating something like this is just making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page, because we all have different levels of understanding about what the metaverse is and potentially different ideas of what the metaverse is. So I think if it's okay with everyone, we'll just spend a couple of minutes kind of introducing ourselves and then sort of doing a bit of level setting just around kind of when we're talking about the metaverse, what we're talking about. And then we'll get into some of the kind of meatier issues maybe facing the creative industries around what it's going to take to fully sort of embrace this sort of, I guess, kind of bunch of new technologies which we're kind of grouping together as the metaverse. So, Rhys, do you want to start?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, I'm Rhys Hancock, co-founder and MD of Metavision. We're a studio and agency for the metaverse, backed by ITV. We focus on bringing brands and entertainment companies and their IP into platforms like Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft. We have a very audience-led approach, and audience and experience-led approach to the metaverse. So for us, it's all about the metaverse being 3D, interactive, immersive experiences and social and entertainment-led in platforms with large audiences of young people. And we think that the metaverse will be basically lots of young people spending time in a social way in a 3D environment with their friends doing entertainment activities. So yeah, we take a very specific entertainment-led approach.
Hi, Hi, I'm Nick. I'm creative director of Metaverse Fashion at Hogarth. I've worked in fashion for about 20 years, ran a startup in digital production, and then went back to university looking at sustainability in fashion, which led into 3D design in clothing. And from there, it was like looking at how those 3D designs can be used as content, as an alternative to like photography or filmmaking or anything like that. That really blew up, especially over lockdown, probably because nobody could do anything, so everyone really loved it. And then that naturally went into NFTs, the metaverse, dressing avatars, that kind of area. And now at Hogarth, my position is generally around Web3. It's sort of like moved away a little bit from the fashion area, just because so many brands are coming to us now wanting to get into Web3 and they need a strategy and know what to do. And people look to me because they think I know what I'm doing.
And I'm Ian. I used to be a creative director in advertising. I worked at Wieden & Kennedy for a bunch of years, and I worked at Google Creative Lab for a bit. And sort of way back when, I sort of started a digital agency called Poke, that sort of at the beginning, I guess, of a similar period when the web was just becoming something that was very interesting. So, one of the advantages of being old is I feel like I've sort of seen this kind of pattern a little bit before. So, the web, when it was in its infancy, you had a lot of the same kind of things going on, a lot of excitement, people not really knowing where to position it, like a massive kind of overinflation and then a kind of correction that happened. And so I think we're sort of living through a similar kind of thing around all of these things at the moment. But I think in the same way that lots of people kind of hung back from kind of getting involved in the emergent digital world, I think the same thing is happening now. Like at your peril, I would, hang back on this because it is happening and it is coming. And I think, we were talking earlier about, the double-edged sword of a huge company like Facebook kind of pivoting to become a metaverse company. And actually, that may make some people kind of recoil away from it, but actually it's really useful because it's pointing to the world that actually there's people investing huge amounts of money, time, and resource in this. So to kind of bet against some version of the metaverse kind of arriving and disrupting life as we know it, I think is all there. And it's really great to be on this panel because I think, Rhys comes from a experience kind of building new innovative kind of formats and things for people to do. And Nick's background kind of, I think, sort of more in Web3. So we've got, two experts here who've actually been doing and kind of making things. So hopefully we can kind of, really sort of get into this. So I think start off with a kind of quite a big question. So how do we think the metaverse is going to change the foundations of creative thinking? And what does it mean for creative industries? And as I was saying, I think the transition to digital thinking took too long and hasn't really been fully integrated in lots of sort of traditional companies. What do you guys think are the mindset shifts that are sort of most important to sort of take on board as we kind of enter this new world, and the things that you see people sort of struggling with?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think there's two main points I would say. So one is thinking in 3D. So when you look at a Roblox audience, I see, say, Roblox as the future mainstream audience. Like we were talking about your twins who are 13, spend all their time in Roblox. They expect their content interactive, in 3D, social, and I think a really good example of that is, say, the Squid Game from last year on Netflix. Obviously, massive show. Most of us have probably at least watched an episode or two. The first reaction of native Roblox and Fortnite audiences was to create their own Squid Game trials, and so there's a generation emerging that expect their content interactive in 3D, and so as we move forward, creativity will need to be, okay, how do I get engaged with this? How are we having two-way feedback? And then the second sphere is what lots of people call convergence. So using things like game engines, the Unreal Engine, for example, an asset that could live in a platform like Fortnite could also be used in virtual production for making a TV ad, or for a game world, or for creating real-world assets or architecture. And I think there's going to be, rather than thinking I'm creating a TV ad and then secondary round of thinking of how does this live elsewhere, you're going to need to embed that kind of 360 thinking from the start, and I think that's really exciting.
I think for me, it's what I really like is the way that it will hopefully support creators, which sort of goes against me coming from an agency, but it will support individual creators so that if you want to make avatars or set up a business making avatars in the metaverse, like you'll be able to do that. You'll have access to the tools. They'll be fairly easy to use. Same with fashion. If you want to make clothing like for any of these avatars, like that's going to be a huge business because, Zuckerberg was saying there's going to be 1 billion people in the metaverse. So surely that's 1 billion different avatars and different sets of clothing that need to be made. And anybody, hopefully, should be able to make these things or set up a business making these things. So it's a huge potential.
I think it's amazing. I mean, it's interesting you bring up Squid Games. As Rhys said, I've got twin girls who are 13, and they've sort of grown up in Roblox, and they know intimately everything about Squid Games. They've never seen it, but they've played through all of the games and all of the levels. And I don't know if you see that kind of with other experiences where.
Well, I think what we're trying to do, so we have a part advertising focus, but we also work a lot with entertainment companies. So we're part of ITV, but we also work with BBC, Channel 4, and other studios that we're not allowed to talk about at the moment, is how can we capture that kind of thinking from day one when you're creating an entertainment brand, driving an audience. And we think the metaverse will be where it's the next space where fandom can be built. It's almost like you can build a commercial brand, or you can build an entertainment brand in a platform like Roblox or Fortnite first, and then it becomes a TV show, or then it becomes a product. And I think for us, that's a really exciting opportunity to, and I think we'll start to see more integrated thinking, sort of planned thinking that results in that sort of Squid Game experience going forward.
And we're sort of circling around it a little bit, but I think that you mentioned the kind of universal assets, so you kind of create a thing once and then it can go into lots of different places. I think one of the things I think is a real opportunity for lots of the people potentially in this room is to think about sort of experience in world building, because actually like a lot of really good creative agencies are really brilliant at creating worlds that kind of brands inhabit. And I think, shifting that mindset from being, okay, we're creating an output, to going, no, we're creating a coherent world that can then sort of live for the longer term. I think, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but this kind of longer term thinking that's kind of required. Like, can you talk a little bit about, the shift to kind of things being, because I think lots of the creative industries kind of work on this. A new thing goes out, we're all really excited about it, but we've kind of moved on to the next thing straight away, whereas end users are expecting, if there's a world that they love, they want it to be there, and they want it to be updated and kind of grow, and a bit of sort of thought about that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely that. I mean, you get that with games, like you get that in Fortnite, like you need new content to keep people interested and keep them in a place, but I presume the future of that, again, will go back to individual creators and user-generated content. So, I mean, Epic's building their own metaverse area. You know, there's like Improbable. It's all built on Unreal, like most of these that I can see. So I think once people, like regular people, like creatives, have the ability to make these spaces their own, then that will keep the whole experience fresh all the time, keep it new, keep new ideas coming in. So again, I think it really is like sort of power to the creators that will keep it interesting.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think it will be led by creators, but I think there will need to be a role for creative agencies and the advertising industry and brands to think longer term and how do we activate creators, or how do we plan for our brands in an interactive environment over a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year period, in a similar way to when the internet came about, as you were saying earlier. Start off with a web page. How does that turn into a long-term internet strategy? I think it's going to be a similar sort of roadmap going forwards.
And Nick, to sort of build on your point of like opening it up to creators, like, what are the things that you're seeing? You know, again, this is going to really date me, but like, you know, the internet sort of really needed its period of like GeoCities and like MySpace and places where people could just like make a mess. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are the spaces now where young creators can kind of get involved and start building and doing? Like, if you were sort of getting into this now, like, where would be a place to go and experiment and make and sort of get into it?
I mean, the place that I got really involved in, like, over the last sort of year and a half was like the NFT space, because you could just make anything, and I mean, you could really sell anything at one point. But it was incredible, because like, and then like the community that built around these projects, like in Discord, it was just like absolutely amazing, and everyone was just very free, sharing ideas, connecting, working on projects. Like, I've worked on projects, like I don't even know who the people are. Like, it was just such an amazing experience.
Yeah, I'd also say this is the economics of the creator economy in the metaverse are so early that like I started Metavision 2 years ago with my co-founder, and we were not gaming people, we were not metaverse natives, we sort of were more, I guess, media strategists, but we sort of got our hands dirty essentially and learn about the space, learn about the communities, learn about the technologies. And I still think it's so early that if you want to learn Unreal, if you want to learn how to create NFTs, it can be done. I think even if you don't become like a top creator in the same way a Kardashian is the top Instagram model now, I think there's going to be a huge demand for the skill set of 3D creation going forwards.
Which leads neatly into the next question, which is, so this kind of acceleration of the creator economy. I mean, one of the things I saw during lockdown, you know, I was involved in a couple of Web3 projects, and you know, you'd see, you know, groups of people basically rewriting the rules to everything, you know, writing, you know, how transactions were going to occur, who gets paid what, and it just like literally writing the foundations of a new economy. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, people who've been involved in doing that are never going to want to come and work at an agency with this like obscure, like, you know, weird operating models where you can't really see who's getting paid what, and there's no transparency, and actually you feel like you have no control and no agency. So, you know, what is it that creative agencies can do to kind of become or to remain relevant to that talent, and why would they want to come and work in a proper company as opposed to being completely independent? Like, is there anything that we can do?
I think for me, because I joined Hogarth recently, there was only so much I could do as an individual, or even like teaming up with people. Like, the scope was quite small. So actually going to Hogarth, like, immediately there's access to like the 6,000 people there that are all makers, mostly. And then also like all of the partnerships we have, like, is across like AR, VR companies, Epic, Meta, Eighth Wall. Like, the partnerships are insane. Me on my own, like, I'd never have got those. I'd never have had access to that. So for me, that was the real appeal.
But you're a senior person that has access to that whole network, right? So whereas if you're coming in at, you know, if you're coming in at 22, 23, like, would you feel that same, oh, I can access the 6,000 people in the network, or is that?
Yes, because if that 22, 23-year-old has got the experience of Web3 in the metaverse, then he's senior. Right. You know, okay. He's not old.
Yeah,
he knows more than everybody else.
I was going to say we work with various creative agencies, media agencies, and there is a complete dearth of experience currently. And if you sort of plant your tanks on the lawn of these agencies, they need talent, and whether you're 18 or 35, if you've got the experience, if you understand the space, which so many people don't. I think there's so many opportunities out there, and I don't think it takes too much to get your hands dirty in learning really the fundamentals of the space, like what is the value, how do you build, even if you're not a builder yourself, just really understanding what the space means can add a lot of value to a creative agency, I think. But at the same time, creative agencies, and I've not worked for a creative agency myself, but I think they need to almost roll out the red carpet and give the platform to young creators to empower them and also add value to their business.
So this sounds super exciting and interesting for talent entering the industry, right? Because, you know, as we're saying, it's like there isn't that much like historical knowledge that you can have because this stuff has only been around for a few years, right? So you could become very experienced relative to your peers.
Yeah.
Actually, as you're saying, kind of command a certain amount of.
Yeah, somebody said that the other day to me. They're like, I was talking about a client, and I was saying, the person I was talking to was a production person, and they said, oh, but the client doesn't know that much about NFTs. It's just a hobby. And I said, it's a hobby to everybody who's just done it for the past year and a half. Like, you don't go to university and learn it. Like, everyone's just been online, playing around, talking about it. That's what it is.
And I think it's often for, like I say, I started Metavision coming out of doing a master's around doing research in tech and media and audiences. And I wasn't a metaverse person. It was just a case of myself and my co-founder upskilled ourselves and built a strategy around it. And I think anyone can do that if you just if you put the work in, but also sort of put yourself out there. I think I know fake it till you make it often comes up in these things, but I think that there is a truth that because so many people want to know about these spaces, I think if you can seem like you're providing value, I think that there's plenty of opportunities out there.
You said something interesting earlier, Reese, about how to give kind of metaverse natives kind of the space to play within a company. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, because I think, you know, from my experience, I've seen, you know, when creators who have a very specific skill set come into an agency, what quite often happens is they're being managed and kind of creatively directed by someone that doesn't really understand what they're looking at. So they tend to, you know, they tend to try and sort of shape it into something that maybe isn't what it was originally intended. So, like, do you have any advice on like how to get the best out of like raw young talent that might be coming into a space and how to?
I'm kind of going through that at the moment with the agency that I'm at, because like we're setting up the sort of Web3 space, and like we're making decks for clients, but the people within the company that I work at don't understand it, and they're saying, can we put more slides in about educating people about the space? I'm like, no, like, you know, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I think, so I think, especially given this is such a new space, and say, like, we do a lot of work in Fortnite, and you get brands coming to us and saying, can we do X thing? And we go back to them saying, no, that's a terrible idea, but you should do this. And sometimes we had one campaign, which I won't name the client, but they were very insistent on doing things one way. But we had to sort of, I guess, push back and say, no, this is more suitable for the space, it's more suitable for the audience. I think you have to either allow the metaverse native creatives to feel empowered, or feel quite strong, or like feel empowered to push back and be like, no, we are the experts in the space. Because if you don't do that, if you let people who don't understand the space kind of push things forward, you're going to end in sort of failure and embarrassment. And I think in what is a new space, or in a lot of the kind of projects that are out in the world at the moment are kind of more PR-led innovation stories, that won't last forever. And as soon as you move past that, if you're not willing to stand up into what you think will make a good campaign or will make a good experience, things won't move forward as quickly as they have the potential to, I would say.
And is there a new sort of a new kind of ideal shape for a kind of for a creative team to deliver this sort of thing? Because clearly it's not an art director copywriter pair kind of building worlds for the metaverse. Like, who, if you were going to design a kind of perfect little squad to go and attack this stuff, what kind of people would you have in there?
Yeah, I think for me, like, roles cross over quite a lot now, so you end up dipping in and out of everyone's roles anyway. But for me, I think like there's a creative, a strategist, a production person, and a blockchain engineer. And like, if you can form the strategy or whatever you're going to make from around those four people, you can kind of farm out the rest of it, whether it's like, it depends what you want to make, but you know, if it's 3D, AR, whatever it is. But the idea for me sort of comes around those sort of people first.
Yeah, so we tend to work with we don't have creatives, sort of the creators that we work with tend to be in a similar model to how creative agencies work with production companies at the moment. But I think it's important. You need people who can speak the language of a game platform or Web3, but you also need people, and sort of what I would lead on is being able to speak enough of that language, but then also being able to translate that to a brand, to like a senior exec who spends about 100th of their time on this space and 99% of their time doing their normal corporate brand management jobs. So I think you have to be able to look both ways, but you do have to have a baseline of understanding of the technology of the space, of the rationale. And a lot of it is a translation job because it's so new and people just don't understand it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of education.
Yeah, I feel like most of my job is just educating on the space.
Some of the ideas we get are wild, though, that come up. Like, we had a guy, I can't remember, I won't say who the brand was, but he came up with an idea yesterday saying, like, he wants to make an AR thing for, like, your AR glasses. So when you look at a person, you can see the contents of their digital wallet. It's just like, no.
And there's probably some data issues on that one.
Well, this is a nice segue into the kind of, what do we think the kind of, there's a question here about the sort of the ethical concerns around the metaverse, and, what do we think the kind of the big sort of challenges are to kind of adoption and people's perception of what the metaverse might be that are going to get in the way of this thing?
So in the whole of the space, I often say the rules of the old world will apply to the new one. So whether that's about like brand or like prominence of content on platforms will be the same, and there will be the same problems of how can I find my content in Fortnite to how can I find my content on YouTube or TikTok. And I think that some of the darker sides of Facebook and YouTube, like moderation, rogue content, will be problems and in the metaverse, because these are UGC platforms. So I think as the content creation side of things, whether you're a creative agency or creators, I think you almost have to take the role of self-moderator and make sure that any content you are putting out is adheres to what your client wants, adheres to like good standards, because ultimately we are working within big tech platforms, we're working within or potentially decentralized technologies. So it's not ideal, but I think for the time being, it's self-moderation and then feeding into, like we have a close relationship with Epic Games, as you said, feeding into sort of best practice and how can we make any platforms better for all. I would say, but there will be many issues. But I say I don't think they are dissimilar problems to what already exists on Web2 platforms.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be interesting to see how it develops. I like the idea of self-moderation in these community groups because I think it works quite well at the moment. But I mean, obviously over the past year, like with NFTs and crypto and that kind of thing, there've been like just so many scams and so many kind of gray areas of like pump and dumps and rug pulls and those kind of things. So, I mean, like, yeah, they seem to be fizzling out now, but I don't know. The anonymity aspect of it, that kind of makes it quite easy to manipulate, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see how that side develops. There definitely needs to be some kind of legislation around certain parts of it.
I mean, I think, going back to your, Zuckerberg thinks there's going to be 1 billion people in the metaverse, sort of moderating that live in real time when there's, 1 billion people all off in different corners of the metaverse doing God knows what. And, it's interesting you bring up the kind of the scamming thing. Like as soon as there's money involved, I mean, it's my kids have been scammed countless times in Roblox and had things stolen from them. And actually, one afternoon, I was like, my kid came in tears that they'd just, been ripped off of a halo that she had or something. I was like, how did it happen? And having a conversation with, she was like 10 at the time, about how she'd put some rogue JavaScript into the browser. And I was just like, oh, no.
I think that's one thing I would say is the barrier to entry to creating content, because it is essentially coding, and in the terms of Roblox, it is a coding language, is higher than putting rogue content on, say, Instagram. And so I think, although there are still many possibilities, and that's already happening for bad content on these platforms, I think the bar will be higher to build that content.
I'm not sure I fully agree, because
Really?
when I went and researched this, I ended up in a Discord community of like teenage Roblox scammers, and they were basically organizing how to go out, and that they had given it a really kind of cute title. It was like going and beaming. So beaming basically means extracting the contents of someone's wallet. And I went through it, and it's like, and they were all sharing tips and tricks on how to beam stuff from other people, and literally text files of all the kind of the scams that you can do. The most nefarious one, sorry, I digress slightly. The most nefarious one was the boyfriend scam. What you do is you go and you befriend someone, and then you basically say, "Oh, I really like the way you look. Will you style my character?" And then they give you the person then gives the person the password. They go and style them, and then they kind of carry on being friends. And then a couple of weeks later, you go, "Oh, that was really fun when you styled me. Can I style you now? Give me your password." And then they do it and just clear out the kind of the contents of the wallet. And there were hundreds and hundreds of these different kinds of like confidence.
And how long have you been running these scams for?
We'll talk about that after.
I feel like you've been down the rabbit hole a little bit.
But I think what I'm saying is that although it's technology on the back end, that stuff is just good old-fashioned confidence trickstering.
Yeah, no, it's true. It is
It
true.
can kind of happen, right?
I think, although I think a lot of the key issues will come down to platform level protections, and maybe in time Web3 blockchain will be a way of solving that. I don't think it is at the moment, but there will. Yeah, I think platforms like Roblox or Fortnite will need to put in more provisions to protect their users.
Yeah, I suppose you need the crime to happen first before you can figure out how to stop it.
It's something like that.
Let's get down to talking about money. So how can creative agencies, like where is the kind of commercial value and the kind of and the path to kind of to riches and fortune in this world, and what are the things that creative agencies can do to make sure that they're kind of approaching this in a way that's going to be a sort of long-term financial success?
Well, in the short term, I hope it's sort of understanding and helping translate brands in and coming up with ideas and running good campaigns. But I think in the long term, it's creating long-term assets, long-term worlds, long-term audiences for brands, and speaking to that point of convergence, owning the IP of if you're creating a virtual production asset that you might bring into a game platform that then lives elsewhere. I think there's real value and economy to scale in building digital real-time projects in the metaverse. But we are in the early stages, and I think we'll probably start to see a boom in what the economy of the metaverse looks like in the next couple of years. But for the time being, I think it's an audience-led thing. It's how can we build deep engagement and brand love with audiences in the metaverse for a brand or for an IP.
I'm beginning to think it's probably through Roblox scams. Sounds like the best way to monetize it. But aside from that, I think I'd agree it's like long-term strategy in these metaverse areas, whatever they might be. I've seen a few new ones demoed. There's one the other day by a company called Improbable that was just amazing. Like, it actually worked as a metaverse area and looked good. And I think if you can sort of build up long-term strategies for brands, how to enter those areas, and not just those metaverse areas, but their bigger Web3 strategy, and it's about combining all of those things together. So that they have like a sort of future-proof plan of how they can keep moving forward in the area and constantly develop it. Like maybe it's new avatars, new skins, new clothing, just in the same way you do in real life. Like there's always going to be fresh content you'll need, especially if you've got your own place in the kind of metaverse area. You're going to need like new housing, new land, new abilities. Like it's kind of endless what you can do. So for creative agencies, it's endless what you can make.
I'll just jump on actually, and I think another thing is, I think at the moment everyone sees the metaverse as siloed, but a big thing we try and do is connect it to existing channels. So last year we brought I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here into Fortnite with John Lewis, but it worked well in Fortnite and did really well, but we also sort of brought that out into social. We brought that out into an influencer space. We did a 4D out of home on the Outernet in London. We had a product placement in the show where the John Lewis ship landed, and then we landed the ship in game, and then we landed it on the 4D out of home. And it's really, how can we make the metaverse more than just an in-game experience? How can it feed into a wider ecosystem, or how can it feed into a brand's wider content plan and ecosystem. I think that's where real value gets unlocked as well.
I mean, I think we've all used the words long term at some point in the kind of conversation. And I'm sort of wondering, is there an interesting sort of almost like a shift in the way that you sort of think about these platforms rather than them being kind of campaignable things that kind of exist for a period of time? Is it more like actually building like real estate? Like, is it, you have to think about it as, you know, in the same way you think about a building, and like, how do you manage people coming in and out of the building? What's security like? Like, how do you update stock in the store? Like, are there some, you know, rather than thinking about this as a communications thing, is there a different way of looking at it that kind of is helpful?
Yeah, I think what I've noticed from the Web3 side with the brands that comes to us, the ideas that I'm coming up with, they're not really like campaigns anymore, but it's more like, it's almost like coming up with an idea for a startup for them. Like each of these ideas that we've been creating, they could be individual companies, or, you know, they're kind of based on individual Web3 companies at the moment. So it's much bigger, it's much more complicated than just coming up with like a single campaign strategy. It's something, you know, you have to consider like, what's it gonna look like going forward? How's it gonna be maintained? Like, who runs the community? Like really boring things, but they all need to be thought about.
I think for us, we always say, I think if you start getting into, do you need to like man a shot? I think it's overthinking the space a little bit. I think for what we focus on, which is the bigger platforms and audience-led experiences, it's what is the end experience, what value you're providing to the user. And I think we've not really moved past, we shouldn't move past that point yet. I think if we focus too much on the kind of means, we lose sight of actually providing what are we trying to do here? Because if we get bogged down in, is this a Web3 asset or is this virtual land? I think it will end up failing. I think ultimately you've got to provide something cool to the user, and then everything else will fall into place after that.
Cool. I think let's do a quick. A series of quick-fire questions I'm going to ask to both of you, and then we'll turn it over to the audience to kind of to ask some questions. So, VR or AR?
VR.
VR or AR?
AR.
Good. A controller or keyboard and mouse?
I'm basic controller.
Controller.
Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Ethereum.
Neither.
Fortnite or Roblox?
Fortnite.
Fortnite.
Are we living in a simulation, yes or no?
Good question. Are we a brain in a vat? This takes me back to philosophy. No.
Yes.
Is Liz Truss in a simulation? That's not fair. Come on, guys.
Let's talk about those pork products.
Who's going to get to Mars first, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos?
Whichever one it is, can we just leave them there?
I was about to say, I don't care.
We've got agreement on that one then. Zuckerberg or Sweeney?
Sweeney every day.
Anyone but Zuckerberg.
Okay, good. Total alignment. Okay, time to hand over to the audience if we can. I think we've got a roving mic, so if you can wait till the mic arrives before asking a question, that would be brilliant. No questions? We've got one. Thank you.
Hiya. So just a quick question. I'm fascinated with all the metaverse stuff, and I know the technology is wildly different, it's much more advanced, and the breadth of it is much bigger. But there's a lot of things that are speaking about the metaverse space that remind me a little bit of the massive talk on Second Life about 15 years ago, and everyone going nuts about Second Life. And then I was writing for Contagious at the time, and everything coming in was like Second Life. And then 2 years later, I don't even know what existed there. So what are the lessons that you've sort of learned from that, and how is this different?
So our whole business is predicated on there's a massive audience, a massive addressable audience in these platforms like Fortnite and Roblox. They are there for the long term, whereas Second Life, I guess, was a fad. I don't think these platforms are only going to get bigger, or if they get replaced by another platform, I think the audience trends of wanting their content in a 3D immersive way is not going to go away. It's going to extend out as they get older. Now, that is an assumption, and I think all brands and media companies need to be planning for a world where they need to build 3D content to reach these audiences in these platforms, because the addressable audience is already massive. They're spending huge amounts of time, and yeah, I think that's very different to Second Life.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I mean, something like Roblox, it's got like, was it 30 to 40 million active users a day?
It's 200 million monthly,
Yeah.
which is pretty chunky.
It's enormous,
So,
you know, and then you've got to consider like the age of the people using it, and like as they grow older, they're probably going to expect something similar in the future, maybe a bit more sophisticated, or I don't know what it might be. So I think those are the reasons why that, and like the how rapid technology improves now. You know, just being able to stream these things through a browser is kind of incredible.
It's interesting you bring up Second Life. I did a bit of digging around to go, what's still left of Second Life now? And you know, if you think about it, it was pretty good. Like it was actually, like technologically, it was remarkable. You know, it had a currency that worked, it had all of this stuff, and that was. How many years ago was Second Life? Like 10 years? Like, and it was remarkable that it even existed. It was like a thing beamed from the future to the wrong time. It was too early. I think, I couldn't agree more with I think the scale thing and the inevitability is there now. And I dug up something the other day, and it's funny how few people have heard about this, but there was, I think Epic gave $144 million to Ukraine, to the war effort in Ukraine a few months ago.
That's from skin sales. Yeah.
And basically, that's more than most countries manage to give. And so I think, just sort of understand, like, it's very easy. And I think the mainstream media doesn't talk about this stuff because it doesn't get it. So, I was really surprised that hadn't become a bigger kind of news story. And I think it's sort of, it's kind of hidden in plain sight, like just how big and how important these platforms are to people who use them.
And I was just to add on to my last point as well. I think there is an overthinking of what the types of experiences are. I think we just need to simplify it down. It's more about it's 3D, it's interactive, it's social, and it's entertainment led. Whether that's with an entertainment brand or a commercial brand or just creators creating their own stuff. I think trying to turn it into this all-encompassing virtual Ready Player One world, or like even like talks about Web3. Like Web3 might be involved in an end-state metaverse, but it's more about, for me, the metaverse is more about the types of experiences. And I think when you simplify it down to that, it makes a lot of sense alongside the size of the audience.
I mean, you said something to me earlier about, the building stuff for the audience and like really, really understanding who's on these platforms and what they enjoy doing. Because, a lot of the work, as you're saying, it's like, it's very much kind of PR, innovation stories and whatever. And, the advantage of having, my 13-year-olds is, quite often I'll wave in front of them, hey, what do you think of this? And like their take on things that are massively sort of, they're winning prizes at advertising award shows, and you put it in front of them and they're like, Dad, this is absolute trash. Who made this? Like, and what's it for? And you just kind of go, oh yeah, we like it because it looks cute and it sort of, it tells a story of what the metaverse might be that we can relate to. But, I think the more, people like me should not be designing things for the metaverse. I would rely entirely on people 30 years.
And yeah, there's huge communities within these platforms. I think TikTok's a really good example. Like I've watched TikTok, but I'm not on it. But you can delve in, and there's some weird things going on, and you don't understand it because it's like a whole different community, it's a whole different sort of zeitgeist to what you're used to. But it's going to be the same in the metaverse. And if people want to authentically come in and reach these audiences, they're going to have to understand some of these trends and what kind of games they like to play. Like, do they like to role play? What's the latest kind of in-game mechanic that is popular and will sort of make them like your experience or the brand you're working with? And I think it's a different way of thinking to this is a really cool TV ad.
Yeah, no, the thing I was going to say earlier was when you were talking about Fortnite in the Ukraine and the skins, like Fortnite's entire model, like, because it's a free game, really, like, unless you get the paid one, which nobody does. Their entire business model is just based on virtual fashion. So they built up their company from selling virtual fashion, which is kind of insane to think about because they made billions from it.
Question?
I am fascinated by this conversation, and I just want to point out that my generation, the people that I hang out with, you know, like parents of my son, parents of the friends of my son's school, have a position on the metaverse as the end of the world, apocalypse, you know, like this is all scam, this is all wrong. I have a 12-year-old, like Ian has a 13, and what I keep telling when I talk to them is that I cannot afford that vision. I need to be an optimist, I need to be involved, I need to be part of that world because that is already here, right? So my question is like, how do we tell that generation that they had to come on board, that they have to help? Because that generation is the one that knows what was wrong in the old world, and knows that we needed a Greta Thunberg to be able to make this world like keep going. I just want the inclusion of me and my generation in terms of understanding that there is connection in this world. I keep saying that my son has his first kiss at Roblox, and he felt connected, he felt good, and he's excited about having a first kiss. So how do you see those two worlds getting together and moving forward and making the metaverse an amazing world, a better world than the world that we live in?
It's a really interesting question. I think the first thing that came to mind was, I remember in the kid, the Daily Mail would be like, if you play GTA, you're going to go around killing people in real life. And I think there is a sort of disconnect. There is a disconnect of the generations. And I think for this one, there probably always will be a disconnect. And I think you've seen like Meta or Microsoft visions of like a 3D Teams where we all have a meeting, and it's like I don't think we'll ever reach the point where rather than being on Zoom, we'll be in a 3D meeting room. But I think you're right in the sense of it is a positive space because they are native to the space. I mean, we've just had 2 years of the pandemic where the only way that your son's generation or your daughter's generation could hang out with their friends was in Roblox, and it was the closest people could feel to being together. And I think just as that generation gets older, and I think it will remain part of their lives, I think it will be communicated better. I think because even my generation, my friends, I grew up playing Halo and Call of Duty, whatever. I think even that generation don't understand what it's like to have a social network in a 3D virtual environment. And I think it won't be until your son's generation gets a bit older where that can start to be really communicated to the older generations.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, sort of over the past year, or maybe 2 years, actually, like, whenever lockdown was, like, the number of friends I've made online in different countries around the world has been, like, kind of insane, just because I think it brought people together more from around the world, around, like, a variety of sort of different interests. Like, for me, it was, like, digital fashion and gaming, NFTs, those kind of things. So, like, I just made so many connections, like, through Discord, Instagram, Twitter, just everything. I don't know, in terms of like the older generation, it's kind of difficult because it's down to the individual, but, you know, I mean, like, my mum still can't use the printer, which there's no way she's ever going to use the printer. I can't imagine her in Fortnite. I tried explaining Web3 to her the other day, but I don't think she got it, really.
I don't know, it's a big question. I think there are a bunch of really positive things coming out. I mean, Nick, your background in kind of, you know, getting into NFTs and the creation of digital fashion through sustainability is a really interesting kind of example, right? That there's a different way to think about fashion and production and like a bunch of things that are, you know, that are ongoing problems with that, you know, consumerist society, that I think some of this can actually offer some quite interesting alternatives potentially. I think also to your point about having connections around the world, we did an amazing like group with about 8 sort of 16 to 22-year-olds. And they were talking about this, and we were sort of, you know, we were asking them questions about, you know, how do you social, like, what's your social group? And it's like, they were spending a lot of time socializing with people that they'd never met face to face. And I think that some of the people sort of, the older people in the group were like, it sounds terrible. It's like they're not real connections. And then one of them said, oh, it's brilliant though, because there's constantly people coming in through London who I've never, you know, who are in town, who I know from this thing. And I know if I go anywhere in the world, like I'll have someone to crash with, and, you know, I've got people who are into the same stuff as me. And I think just our social networks and connections aren't necessarily about the friends and people that we see every day, but their vision of sort of like who they're connected to was much more global and much, you know, just a completely different way of looking at things. And you know, I hope in many ways that the transition to the metaverse is just a massive potential for a transfer of power to a younger generation who have
about to say
different
that.
ideas and, you know, and are going to make the changes necessary for us to sort of survive as a society. And so I think, you know, the younger that audience is and the more profound the change is, actually the more hope and optimism I have for our future.
And I also think, sort of going back to this sort of creative skills point earlier, the fact that the leading social networks for that demographic are essentially teaching them to code, I find a really exciting proposition. The fact that they're hanging out with their friends and also being upskilled in digital building, I think is actually quite an exciting thing for like the wider economy and for future industry.
Yeah, totally that, or like even like creating like characters in games, like avatars, all those kind of things. It's great because it's all community led, and you're just working with people from around the world. So it's just amazing, really.
Are we done?
We can kick it off.
Sorry. We can hang around outside. If you want to ask a question, we'll be around. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.